So France is a melting pot, which means people do recognize that people are coming from different cultures, different sets of etiquette. And yet France also appreciates, if you're coming to my country, enjoy my culture, enjoy my etiquette. And you don't have to assert the fact of, I am not French, unless you are French, but rather appreciating, it's good to appreciate their culture and their etiquette. Just little things like you put your hands above the table at all times. In America, if you're not actively eating, you always put your hands below the table, and that's what's polite. But in France, you always keep your hands on the table, and sometimes you'll like rest your hands right on the wrist, right there on the table. When you are meeting people, you don't have to be as loud. It's something that you learn, that your ears get better the longer you live in France, because people talk more quietly. They aren't so loud, so brash as Americans are. And I know there are other countries that are even louder than us. I was companions with a newer missionary, and I had told him, okay, you don't have to be so loud. It's kind of startling how loud you are on the street. Maybe when you say hello, say it a little more softly. And I promised him, okay, if you say bonjour and you say it nice and softly, then they will still hear you. The French have super ears. That's like their superpower. And the next day we were walking across this bridge over a train station, and this girl was walking the other direction, and he said to her bonjour, and she responded bonjour, and just kind of kept walking. And once she was out of, or at least what he thought was out of earshot, he turned to me and said, "It worked! They heard me!" And I said, yeah, you can even go half that volume still. So the French have super ears, and just being willing to adapt and embrace those little parts of culture is so useful, because you're learning what it is to be French. When I'm in France, I become French. And doing that helps you not just connect with them so you don't offend them, but it helps you understand who they are and how they act. And doing all of this helps you connect with them so much better.
Well, I love France, obviously, and the French people, but every stereotype that I've ever heard in my life was not true at all. Well, like, they're super rude, they hate Americans, they're snobby, stuff like that. No, I was amazed. Like, I remember multiple times we'd be lost and like looking for something, and like, hey, do you know where this place is? And the person was always just incredibly helpful. Like, oh yeah, like, and then if like we had a map, they like pull it out, like, you're gonna walk here and go over here. And then if they didn't know, they're like, oh, I don't know, but hold on, let me ask someone. And they would help. They would be really, really, really willing to help us out. And the only thing I guess they don't like is when Americans come and they don't speak French, and then they get mad at the French people for not speaking English. But yeah, like, no, they love it. Like, there's often times like, oh, you're from America? Can I take your spot while you're here? Like, and the people would wear like American scarves, American shirts and stuff. They do love cheese, so that was one true stereotype. And wine. Like, if you yawn in public, you're supposed to cover your mouth. Like, if you don't, it's really offensive. That was one that I remember. There's just obviously there's certain French phrases that, like, as an American, when you translate it to French, like, you'll translate it directly, it doesn't work. And so that's one thing that, so I guess that's one thing that I did, as I want to make sure I was saying stuff right. Okay, for example, like, so you can say je sais in French, and it means I know. And there's je sais, which is I try. So je sais. And so people would say to me, oh, like, you speak French really, really well. And I would say, oh, je sais. Like, trying to say I try, but it would come off as I know. And they'd be like, okay, American over here. But yeah, some other stuff. Oh yeah, like your hands, when you eat, you're supposed to keep them both on the table. And you have a fork in one hand and a knife in the other, you're supposed to use both. Put your hands under the table, it's super rude. In the States, you can say to someone like, hey, how's it going? Like, you don't know. It's totally fine. But in France, if you say to them, like, in French, hey, how are you? If you don't know the person, they're like, why? Why do you want to know? Why is that your business, you know? But you can say, like, bonjour, like, you can be like, oh, hey. But if you ask them specifically, how are you, it's really weird for them. So don't do that. Like, if you're like, bonjour, comment ça va? It's weird. So in the west of France, there's a place called Britannia. And everybody knows what crepes are. right? In Britannia, they make these things called galettes. It's a different flour they use to make crepes, and it's more like a dinner crepe than a dessert crepe or sugary crepe. In Britannia, if you call a galette a crepe, people will get offended. They're like, it's not a crepe, it's a galette.
Etiquette, cultural do's and don'ts. Well, when you go to France and Switzerland even, don't act like an American, I suppose. Don't act like a tourist. Be very respectful. Very, very respectful. They're a wonderful people. I love the French people. They're very to the point. They'll call stupid out when they see it. That's the kind of people they are, and I like that. They're more philosophical. Here in America, we have a lot of math and science and a lot of engineers and such. In France, there's a lot more emphasis on philosophy and rhetoric and literature and such. So the people know how to talk, and they know how to talk to you. Once you get a French person really comfortable with you and on talking terms with you, you can talk to them about pretty much anything. And they won't sugarcoat anything either. They'll tell you exactly what they think about it. And if people get offended, they talk about it, they get over it. Either that or there's a huge feud. So you get the extremes as well. It's either one or the other, but that's what makes it interesting. Their culture is very, very rich. They've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of existence, and with that comes a ton of history and a ton of culture. And you can see it just by walking through the cities. I mean, a lot of the buildings that you'll come across in France are older than America. Most of the cathedrals in France are hundreds of years older than America is. The French people really like it when you try to learn as much as you can about their history and their culture.
French are extremely, like I said, a lot of their social life revolves around the table, and so your manners around the table are extremely important. So I guess the advice I would say would be to do whatever anybody else around the table is doing. So if first off, don't put your elbows on the table, and don't put your elbows out, because as Americans we tend to eat a little bit kind of like this, where our elbows have about 2 feet of space on each side of us, and we end up rubbing elbows with the person next to us. In France, that is extremely disrespectful. Keep your elbows by your sides, and you just eat with a fork and a knife too. Cutting things with your fork is not polite over there at all. And so you have a fork and a knife. They have it there for a reason. So you cut it with one hand. You stick it with your fork with the other hand, and always chew with your mouth closed. So French people are very particular about themselves. They don't like anybody getting into their life whatsoever if they don't know them, or if they don't have a chance to get to know them. So the biggest thing I would say to understand the French culture is, first off, just be their friend. If you see somebody on the street and you really like their shoes, that's your number one go-to to get into the conversation. You stop them like, hey, I really like your shoes. Where'd you get your shoes? You talk about them. We as people in general, not just the French, as Americans, as human beings, we love to talk about ourselves. We absolutely love it. I started off just talking about them, something that they had on, their bike that they had, the bag that they were wearing, something like that. And then from there, I'd go from there to how long they were here, to how long I was here. And then they'd ask, really, what are you doing over here? Like, oh yeah, I'm American. Like, dude, you're stupid if you're over here if you're an American. Like, go back to America. France sucks. That's what a lot of them will say, actually. And then that's when you're just like, oh no, I love France. I'm actually here. I've been here for this amount of time. Like, I've been to this city, and this city. And I really love the French people. And they're just like, you're crazy. Like, they'll look at you, they'll give you the weird look. Like, dude, you're nuts. The French people I like to look at them as people as having guard dogs, watchtowers, barbed wire, and the whole thing, And you just have to get through all that by asking certain questions that don't feel threatening to them. And once you're in, you're in. If you can become a French person's friend, they're your friend for life.
People in France are so diverse. It's so hard to say French people are this way or people in France are this way, because you have a lot of African immigrants, you have a lot of Arab immigrants, you have Portuguese, Spanish, like everything you could imagine. Like you start talking to someone on the bus and you'll notice a little accent and you'll say, "Oh, where are you from?" "Iraq," or "Oh, I speak Persian," or "I'm from Congo." There are a lot of people from Congo, especially in Belgium. Or there are a lot of people who, because of the economic situation in Spain and Portugal, have just decided to try somewhere else. And so you get people from all over. And I think it's really cool to watch how people just like interact and respect such different cultures. How they've kind of held on to their own culture, but it doesn't cause problems because they respect each other. And so you'll get a lot of people who are really just friendly, who will talk your ear off once you contact them, and you've got other people who are kind of more reserved and who just who would rather be private. But France is it's such a great place because you have all sorts of things, all sorts of cultures, and they just kind of peacefully coexist.